Hello and welcome to another Best Junglers episode, this one for patch 14.19, and the balance team apparently hates stability because we have changed all the items yet again. Now, while the jungle systems haven't changed that much or at all, the itemizations will create an absolutely new and different meta, and a lot of champions who were strong will not be. So we will go over the best junglers overall for low and high MMR as well. But to understand where your champion and playstyle fit in this current meta and to be able to adapt to all of the changes Riot will bring, you must head to Virkayu.gg. Not only do I have a free jungle improvement resource, I also have a dedicated program with jungle video courses, jungle coaching classes, a jungle VOD library, special weekly content you'll see nowhere else. All of this available through a premium jungle Discord, which is highly active, a huge community that help each other climb using my jungle program and courses. As we have seen by everybody hitting their peak rank goals in Split 1 and Split 2 of Season 14 as fast as possible. So to climb faster than everybody you know and to jungle diff every game you play, head to Virkayu.gg or click the link in the description below. Right, S tier page number 1, Udyr, and no one is surprised, I think. You know why? Because most champions had damage nerfed, or cost increased, or haste removed. Udyr's like, well, you know, you took some of my AP from Leandry's, but you buffed the HP on Deadman's, you buffed the HP on the Jack Show. I don't really care about the Abyssal Mask, it's still good on me also. And remember, throughout this video, the big context is that assassins lose some of their rotational power in their haste. The fighters lose raw damage and gain some HP. So champions like Udyr who do percentage max HP damage and are unkillable now with the buff to tank items relative to every other class, this means that even though you might notice some of the damage missing from Leandry's, you will, it won't matter relative to everybody else because you will still do more damage to them because of the HP shift, you are still not even more unkillable, and of course that's only the default build which we recommend for people to, get into Udyr, but you obviously do have the AD fighter varieties that you can use, which also do a ridiculous amount of damage. Yeah, he is pretty good, and on the other hand, Skarner was pretty good last patch. You will see him a lot at Worlds. The champion was still extremely broken. However, now, when you're building Heartsteel, you can buy 2 Giant's Belts, which means if you play a champion that likes to rush this in the jungle, that goes for all your Mundos and Chogats as well. The build path makes you significantly stronger prior to completing Heartsteel because you're running around with an extra Giant's Belt versus just a Ruby Crystal. And even though Steric's Gauge was slightly nerfed, it doesn't really matter when you're building more HP with most of your itemization. Now yes, you do lose a little bit of that HP, well a lot of it on Thormail, but the cost goes down, and they increase the damage from it with the armor that you build. So if you can have, your Steric's Gauge to survive your burst and some added damage, you also have the Tenacity, you got Unending Despair, Jack Shows, and Thormails, Kenny Crew Cones, you become truly unkillable while still doing a lot of damage because his damage wasn't really nerfed, wasn't nerfed at all because the guy doesn't build any except for the Steric's Gauge. It's just in his kit, it's raw. You add in about 14,000 years of CC, slows and guaranteed lockdowns, this champion is absolutely busted. Now I can hear the wails of despair down the road, but how can Viego be third? Because a lot of it, again, like with Heck Remains, is your build paths. You have to understand with Viegos and other champions like that, even though you lost a lot of damage in certain build pathways, your 3-item spike is still good, your 2-item spikes are still good. It's the individual spike that's gonna suck. You still have synergy with your items, but when you rush Eclipse on whatever champion you rush Eclipse on, now you don't get to just kill someone even if you're down a level or 2 items. That's a good thing. You need it to be controlled. Now you actually have to maintain or have a lead or actually play slowly to catch up and then have that synergy between your items in order to actually dominate. That means if you're a champion that spikes from 1 item, you're gonna still be okay, but if you're a champion that spikes to 2 to 3 items, you're not gonna be carried by a singular item. What's this got to do with Viego? Everything, because Kraken Slayer, still great to go. Yes, you can still go Sundered Sky. Yes, Sterix is still great. Can you go Trinity Force first? Yes, you can do that. But Blade was nerfed. It's still a viable thing that you can build, with Send as well, but later on in the build more so. Remember that the changes are to everybody in a different ways. Every class had something different happen to them. So even though you do less damage as a fighter, which is good because you're not an assassin, you shouldn't be one, you now mostly have added survivability or damage throughout a longer fight. Think about that, play appropriately around that, understand where your spikes now lie, and you'll see that Viego is still an absolute prince. Graves. I made fun of Graves in the patch notes because I was like, haha, the cost to collect went up. Joke's on us because the nerfs to Ghostblade were just for, melee. And even though Collector is expensive, it is a premium item, and remember it says 5% HP, right? And of course, fighters and tanks have more HP. So overall, while we do have a shift in the meta, Graves fortunately also has a very important thing. Not only did fighters and assassins lose, let's just say damage raw, through different mechanisms, but that's what they did, the Graves has True Grip passive which was buffed prior to this a couple months ago. Now all of a sudden, Graves has the ability to actually synergize with the jungle systems that we have, the meta we have, but he's not being outdone by fighters in terms of damage. His true grit actually does something because they also lost damage themselves. Not only that, when you have a more AD focused meta, the Ninja Tabby, the plated steel caps, will add an extra layer of defense against those champions. Suddenly, Graves has everything he needs against all the AD champions to destroy them, and he can be pretty good into tanks as well. Elise, what a beautiful change list of quality of life buffs, giving vision on the E, having flashy relationships with that E cocoon as well, making her spider passive come through on the repel E when you land all the time versus only when you physically click it, ult cooldown going down. It's really a beautiful change list of buffs for her, while also having percentage missing HP on her execute on that Q spider form, as well as the fact that all her items do a significant amount of penetration. So they may be tanks, and they may also have less MR overall, but that means Elise is going to kill you even faster. And now she can actually handle outplays mechanically with those modern champions. Basically, she is looking really good unless you're a hobbit, or I suppose an orc. Lilia was ruined, destroyed, could do nothing, and then Riot were like, but what if everyone has more HP and less damage? And Lilia said, all right. Yeah, she also loses damage from AP on the Leandries, but it doesn't really matter because her passive and her general kit's damage is still outrageous. The thing is, she couldn't hang with the other itemization spikes of the meta when she was slower at farming, which is what they nerfed. Now, instead of her clearing going up here, her damage also goes down, but everybody else's that she was facing all the time in the meta, they clear slower, they do less in PvP senses, and they have more HP for her to destroy. So now, relatively, she got buffed compared to everybody else, and it's once again very, very strong. Obviously now with the less MR on all these champions through all their items and things like that, that does help her against a tankier, more HP filled meta, but what can you do? I've seen a lot of people say like, how can a movement be broken? Well, that's because Abyssal Mask was buffed first and foremost. Secondly, a lot of that amplification still applies in this current meta. Thirdly, people don't realize that this champion has true damage on his passive. He has bonus resistances on his E. He has maximum health magic damage on the W. And he's got CC that rivals our Morgana Q. And he just also does a lot of damage in general. Here's the thing about him though. Years ago, to make him more viable, they changed that Q bandage toss to basically have 2 charges and have the girth of an anaconda. The thing is, the mobility that this provides, the CC that he has with everything else I just listed, plus great itemization, and again, he also had that direct relative buff to fighters, assassins, and everybody else, just makes him very obnoxious to deal with. He's easy, but it's not the old days where you could run it on a Mumu and laugh at him and kill him 14 times. Guy's Conqueror now, guy has all the CC in the world, he's got great itemization, the champion is strong. Speaking about strong champions, this one is a little bit of an abomination with the AP builds at the moment. There are obviously the more scholarly and gentlemanly tanky builds where you go, you know, your Leandries and things like that into full tank. Those will perform the best. Mostly also because Thornmail and Frozen Heart have a beautiful synergy at the moment whereby you do a crap ton of damage. Thornmail was changed to have even more damage come out of those thorns, and now because it's really, really cheap and you can buy other armor to go with it, the damage spike for this is pretty nutty. When this champion has unnecessary AP ratios, thank you right for no reason, his Leandries plus that equals a lot of tankiness, a lot of utility, a lot of CC, control objectives, and of course a lot of damage. The AP builds are also popping off actually because Storm Surge is still ridiculously strong, but we also have the Cripplume having that base heal, instead of scaling with AP, now just has raw flat values. What this means is you don't need anything to make it go healy. And as such, a champion that thrives on going in, CCing, and peeling with his passive, although most of you don't do that anymore, you should, that heal just amplifies all the greatness that you need to keep on winning fights. And as we go over to the Karthus page, you will notice, wait, Karthus? Yes, that's right. But you rush Leandries, he lost 20 AP, no? No, you don't rush that, you rush Blackfire Torch. Much like the Cripplume, when they buff the passive there to have less AP scaling and more base value damage, it's more reliable. That means it scales less with itemization and scales more upfront. So if you use that base power now and actually spike heavy early and then snowball to the rest of your itemization, you're gonna have a great time. Speaking of great times, E-Boy Kane as well as Chad Boy Rost are flying around the rift with great itemization. And remember, yes, Black Cleaver did suffer some pretty awful nerfs, but it's still a higher HP meta, and Rost is the one that thrives in these longer duration fights, so you know. And even though Blue Kane has also had the assassin effect from the itemization nerfs, he doesn't really care as much because he wasn't one of those assassins that was innately tight itemization. It was his kit that was strong, and it remains strong to this day. It also helps that Hubris, only lost 5 haste, so Hubris, Opportunity, Grudges, and of course the beautiful Edge of Night equals you still win. Shaco is a fascinating one as well, because you might think, well, they nerfed his assassins. No, they didn't, because obviously in his particular case, the systems are still the same, his itemization is still the same, you rush the Blackfire Torch, same reason for the Karthus, and even though Profane was nerfed a little bit for those mid laners, for Shaco, it's in the jungle, I don't really care, I still assassinate you. His world hasn't changed, and all OTPs, I don't think they notice the world around them anyway, they just run around like psychos. Nidalee's the interesting one, because Lich Bane, even though it lost a bit of that movement speed, still is a ridiculously strong item. In the general player base, she is not popping off as much as I thought she would. In high elo, obviously she is. I'm putting her here because I think her potential in this meta, with this strong itemization centered around Lich Bane, is pretty damn good. The problem is with her win rate is you see people rushing things like Storm Surge and Leandries and Rocket Belt. Just go Lich Bane, guys. Keep it simple. You can go Leandry second if you really want it. Shadow Flame is really, really good. And even though you might think, okay, look, Void Stuff seems pretty nice in this meta, you can also go Cripple him just as much later on after your Death Caps and Zhonya's and things like that. The longer the game goes and the less you have that penetration, the more I lean into the Void. But the base healing from that Cripple, even though it was nerfed a little bit, is still something that provides a lot of utility for you and your team as you want to close out. And now instead of close out, let's close in with a Nocturne ultimate. And you're thinking, but they nerfed the damage from Hexblade. They also gave it 150 more HP, which means you're way less likely to die. And obviously you have your Stridebreaker first, minimal nerfs. Black Cleaver was nerfed, but again, now you really just don't die because no one has the damage to kill you, and you have more HP, and you're still Nocturne, and you have Lethal Tempo back. By the by, the win rate on that looks way better than anything else. Still recommend Conquer as a default, but Lethal Tempo could easily take over. Keep your eyes on that, test it out for yourselves. Well, hello Kindred, welcome back. Yes, we have had some changes to movement speed and all the ADC items, and costs have shifted, but most importantly, Kindred has that thing called target current HP on the W and target missing HP on the E. These things scale with marks. So that means if you're a tank, you hate Kindred. Always has been, always will be, always will has had to have been. But at the same time, fighters now, which have more HP and less damage, can't really deal with Kindred as easily as they have done over the past couple of years. Thus, Kindred comes back into the meta as a strong, highly skilled counter to everybody else that's running around. Things like Zac that get the benefit from the bonus immolate damage on the Sunfire that allows him to actually clear quicker, and then obviously sustain and heal and not be killed by fighters anymore. So Zac is looking really good overall also for these reasons. And the Thornmail and Sunfire also help. So for Bel'Veth, you will notice that some things were nerfed, and now you're going, well, does that make her weaker? Yeah, no, it's Bel'Veth, so she's always good, items are great, plated Steel Caps are good against the fighters you have, Merc Treads aren't as great as they were, but if you need them, you can buy them. Wit's End was changed, she doesn't care. Black Cleaver was, she doesn't care. Bel'Veth just carries on doing what Bel'Veth does without any remorse, without any concern for good jungle fundamentals, and as such is the final champion on this A-tier list. And as we go over to the low elo page, Amumu, Nocturne, Lilia, Shyvana, again looking very nice in this low elo. Yes, we're worried about things like the Shojins losing that haste, and you've got the Leandras losing the AP. Guess what? You don't care. You just stat check everybody with those same 2 items because you have an even better refund on your basic abilities from Shojin in lieu of losing the raw haste. You also get a whole bunch more HP, so now you're even less killable, which is kind of what you want with these kinds of champions. Warwick is looking great because Titanic Hydra, yeah, they got even more HP, and being able to build it out of a Giant's Belt, the quality of life you get from being able to build better components before item completion cannot be overstated. This is not just him, it's everybody on this video. It's every champion in the game. When an item has better components to build, your spike comes online sooner, and the completion, while still meaningful, isn't the be-all and end-all. You're not waiting to just straight up finish the item before you become useful. You actually have great spikes just from components, especially early on as a jungler, so that is greatly valued by all of us. But of course, especially in low elo where everybody just stat checks anyway. Udyr, obviously great, Briar and Viego rounded off. Now we go over to the high elo page. Obviously, Skarner is going to be dominating. What's fascinating here is you see the Jarvan. The Jarvan and general player base is suffering really badly. High elo, obviously fine. Really strong, in fact. His passive was just buff, so again, that's good against everything that's just happened. But as I said, understanding that items individually are not as broken anymore, and understanding that sometimes you have to go for extra rotations means that you need more reliable skill set usage. Better target selection, understanding when you actually come online, not overestimating what Eclipse and Sundered Sky do now and actually understanding that's been tapered back a bit. So obviously better players and more experienced players will understand that. Sure, Jarvan will rebound a little bit. Same for things like Kha'Zix, who isn't in this video, but he's performing fine at high elo, not so great in general player base. Obviously, that's a matchup thing and a target selection thing and a meta thing, but the Nidalee, Udyr, Elise, Graves, and Bel'Veth, nothing can surprise you on this particular section for high elo. Naturally, remember, there's a lot of things that can work in this MMR range. I didn't even talk about the Xin Zhao. Obviously, Nunu and Willump are great here also. There's just a lot of great stuff that you can pick, but the high elo meta will be the one that takes a little bit longer to figure out, because those subtle differences between all the skill in the players is more revealing when the champions are more easily balanced and we're not quite sure which items and champions are going to be ultimately the best in the next month. But none of this means anything if you don't understand that sometimes you need to gank less in order to get more kills. Click the video to find out the secret.
Go on, click the link now. Do it. I command you. Click it. Click it now. Click it.